I never felt quite right. I don't know if I ever knew what feeling healthy was. I established a new normal for myself in my life of how I should feel, and it was just never that good. I never felt full. I was always weak. I was always tired. She expressed this to me that she viewed me as an untreated Crohn's patient with a higher chance of flare up, a higher chance of surgical intervention in the future, and a higher chance of cancer, even though I had no symptoms. It completely healed and reversed her ulcerative colitis. And within weeks to a month, she was back to normal digestion.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's doing well. Today we have Tanner with us. Tanner, welcome. Thanks for being here. How you doing today?
Glad to be here, Shawn. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Where are you, if you don't mind sharing, where are you located?
I'm actually in Montana, so not too far from you.
Oh, nice. What part of do you mind sharing what part?
I'm in Missoula.
Missoula. Okay. I know there's a Missoula Maggot Fest. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago. It gets pretty crazy around here.
That's a big rugby tournament for you guys. I know back when my years ago, I used to play rugby. That was a sort of a popular rugby tournament, the Missoula Maggot Fest.
That's right.
I guess their team were the Missoula Maggots.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good to have you here. I guess let's just get started. This is a success story. So tell us, when there's success, there's usually something that precedes success. So let's just get into your background and kind of go from there.
Yes, there's quite a bit that precedes my success. Again, my name is Tanner. I'm in Montana. I'm 33. Being that I'm 33, that puts me at growing up in the 90s, which means, you guessed it, I was on the 90s kid diet, full of cereal, Pop-Tarts, fruit snacks, loads of carbs and other processed foods. I never felt quite right. I don't know if I ever knew what feeling healthy was. I established a new normal for myself in my life of how I should feel. And it was just never that good. I never felt full. I was always weak. I was always tired, bloating, stomach cramps, tons of other digestion issues, along with the typical anxiety and mental health stuff that comes along with having a lot of inflammation and brain fog and stuff like that. In 2004, just before I started high school, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease after a colonoscopy that didn't look too good. I was underweight, anemic, and like I said, just completely overwhelmed with brain fog, which made school nearly impossible for me. I was prescribed oral medications to attempt to reduce the symptoms and inflammation. I was on those oral medications for several years. Luckily, in 2004, when I was diagnosed, there was also a dietitian in the doctor's office who my doctor had me go see. And there was no talk about getting me to a full state of health through diet, but there was some talk about maybe there's some foods that I should avoid to try to minimize certain symptoms here and there, but it was nothing major. I remember her giving me some warnings about small seeds, rough, raw veggies. I was already staying away from most of that stuff because it never made me feel good anyways. So there wasn't too many takeaways from that dietitian that I saw. After some time on that medication and doing a little bit of diet experimentation, I had some alleviation of symptoms. Eventually, most of my stomach pains and cramping and Crohn's-like symptoms seemed to have gone away, but everything else was still there. The brain fog, the weakness, always being really hungry, all of that stuff was still with me. Luckily, my doctor was supportive of me attempting to wean off this medication and see if I could maintain some sort of semblance of health without any pharmaceuticals, which back then was really rare. It's pretty rare to find a doctor like that now, but back then even more. In 2011, I began to work out consistently because I was always extremely underweight, extremely skinny. And upon starting to work out consistently, I had to really increase my caloric intake. I was eating so little before introducing some sort of fitness plan into my life that I had to like double and even triple my caloric intake after I started working out, which led to a whole host of problems. It basically reignited all of my symptoms because what I went to upon trying to increase my calories was processed foods, carbs, things that are high in calorie. And it left me feeling absolutely horrible. And that gets us closer to 2014. My symptoms were worse than ever. And one of the worst parts about it was I ended up developing a pretty severe fistula, which, if you know anything about this symptom, it's absolutely horrible and it will ruin your life. And it completely disrupted my life, left me with daily debilitating pain. And I suffered with that for many years. After losing so much trust and hope in traditional medical treatments, I had to seek treatment from a naturopath who unfortunately wasn't much help. It was the regular old chasing down numbers and blood work and try to tweak things here and there. And it's just left me in the same situation. Rationally and intuitively, I knew it had something to do with my diet. I just knew it had to. And I was explaining some of my symptoms to one of my friends, and he was like, if you're suspecting that it's something you're eating, why don't you see what happens if you fast? And I was like, that's a good idea. Let's establish some sort of baseline, establish some sort of control, see what happens if I just don't put any food in my body. Let's see what happens. And lo and behold, the following days, I did a 3-day fast. And the second and third day, I had almost no pain or discharge from my fistula. And most of my other cramping symptoms were not there. Confirmed my suspicion about this definitely has something to do with diet. And after many failed dietary experiments, elimination diet, I was just completely overwhelmed with my symptoms and my pain. I was in so much pain, I was having trouble walking. I made the difficult decision to seek out advice from the other GI doctor in town because I was running out of options and I was in too much pain. I knew it had something to do with diet, but I couldn't figure it out. I just couldn't. And after going through all the GI testing, blood work, another colonoscopy, it didn't look good. And I was explaining to my doctor what I was doing, and he told me straight up to my face, you gave it the old college try, but it's just not going to work. What you're doing is not going to work. And I was extremely defeated. It was horrible. And so he said, my only option now is to go on a biologic infusion like Humira or Remicade. And I was always trying to put those things off. I never wanted to use that as my go-to. I wanted to try to figure this out on my own because I just knew it had to be something in my diet. So I was 2 weeks away from my first biologic infusion, and I stumbled upon a guy who was posting in this Crohn's disease forum, and he explained that he had all the same symptoms as me, and he completely cured it and reversed it through diet. The diet he initially used was the SCD diet, or specific carbohydrate, which is basically just no sugars, grains, or starches. So the next day, I was 100% on that diet, 100%. And like I said, in the past, I didn't feel too good when I ate a lot of vegetables and nuts and seeds and stuff like that. So even on the SCD diet, I was closer to animal-based because I was not doing many leafy greens or veggies or any of that sort of stuff. I naturally fell into sort of an animal-based thing through this SCD diet. I started that the next day, and 4 days later, 100% of my symptoms were gone. I had no pain or discharge left in my fistula. And ever since then, I have been completely symptom-free. And I started this dietary change about 6.5 years ago.
That's good for you, first of all. It's got to be. And for those people that don't know what a fistula is, it's basically, you develop a pathway from your skin into your intestine. And basically you just have direct communication. It gets infected. There's often pus and other stuff that comes out of that. It's often treated with obviously antibiotics, sometimes surgical resections and things like that. Had they ever got many people with Crohn's disease, about 40% of them end up losing part of their intestine, whether it's short, small, or large intestine. It's very often progresses to this and stuff. And so what was your hesitation about going on the biologics? Why did you not want to? What were you worried about with the biologics? Because what was your perception of going on those?
The potential side effects from something that serious is really scary. I can't list them all now, but as you can imagine, it's quite the list. And so going on a biologic like that, I wanted that to be my last line of defense, because once you're on something like that, and it basically just suppresses your overall immune system. It's basically, in my mind, it was admitting defeat, and I didn't want to do that. I knew that there was more information out there. I knew that there was people out there having success outside of the pharmaceutical world, and treating symptoms rationally never made sense to me. I wanted to find the root cause, the root problem. Why was my body doing this? I don't believe that the body, most of the time, I just don't believe that the body, it just malfunctions and attacks itself. That just never made sense to me. To me, it's always just been a stimulus and response. I just didn't know what the stimulus was. I knew very well what the response was, which was horrible. I didn't know what the stimulus was. And I never view the human body as pharmaceutical deficient.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I don't either. I think that's I think that's the perception out there. That's what healthcare is. It's some absence of pharmaceuticals. We need to get as many people on medications as all possible to manage symptoms, which does nothing really for what's causing disease. That's pretty clear. So you said you're 33. So remind me again, when did you first notice you had gut issues as a kid? Even this may have been brewing for years. When did you first have perception that my guts aren't working like everybody else's are?
Yeah, I have memories when I was really young about I never felt right. Like I said, extreme fatigue. I always felt like I needed a nap. I always felt really tired after eating. I always had stomach cramping. And one of the worst side effects, the stomach pain and stomach cramping was intermittent, depending on when and what I ate and digestion and all of that. But one of the things that was so disruptive was I was so anemic and dealing with that side of things that I always felt hungry. I was hungry. I had that weak, shaky, hungry feeling all day, to the point where I even started looking into blood sugar problems, because it felt like a similar, either really low blood sugar or really high blood sugar type of deal, where I was just always hungry, weak, with stomach cramps.
Yeah. And just remind me, so specific carbohydrate diet you went on initially, is that what you're still on today? You've been on that for now several years?
Yeah, so that's what I originally jumped into about 6.5 years ago. I didn't know about carnivore. And like I said, the SCD diet led me into the world of a stricter, it was the first time I did an elimination diet where I completely eliminated all sugars, grains, and starches. Most other elimination diets I did, I still had some sort of element of one of those in my diet. And that's why I believe it always led me to a dead end, all of the experiments I did with elimination diets. And I never felt good eating a lot of vegetables. And so if I take out sugars, grains, and starches from my diet, what does that leave me? Okay, it leaves me a little bit of fruit and mostly meat and some hard cheeses. So that's where I started. And then like I said, 4 days. I'm not exaggerating. It sounds crazy, especially when I'm speaking about a symptom that's as severe as a fistula. And this is one of my main points that I want to get across here today is I know how many people are out there suffering, whether they've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease or not, with a fistula. And it is horrible. And I know what it's like. I lived with it for years. And one of the other reasons why I was hesitant to use a pharmaceutical intervention was because it doesn't even have that good of a success rate. Even my doctors were telling you, hey, we can try this. But people like you who go on these biologics, there's a 40-50% chance that this fistula will recur for maybe the rest of your life. And so that didn't even sound like a good solution anyways. So back to my diet. Yes, the SCD diet it only left me with a couple options. And the main one that I felt the best with was meat. And then as more of the carnivore stuff started coming about online, I'm like, wow, I'm already mostly doing this. Maybe I can feel even better and start eliminating some of these other things that I don't necessarily even. And once I started eliminating more nuts, like I was eating a lot of nut butters and stuff like that, even little smaller things that were unrelated to Crohn's cleared up almost immediately. Like I always had eczema patches on my arms, especially in the wintertime. And that's been completely gone for years. Going to even more of an animal-based approach, it just continued to get better and better.
Yeah, that's great. And I've seen it. I'm sure you're aware. I've seen a lot of folks now with either Crohn's or another inflammatory bowel disease called ulcerative colitis, which have some similarities, or they're somewhat different. But with that's for sure. And when you're talking to your gastroenterologist, you said one was supportive of diet, the other one said we're just going to put you on drugs. Have you been back to them since this has gotten so much better? And what was the discussion like at that point?
Yeah, so I actually had an intake appointment that would have preceded my first infusion. And I actually called and canceled that infusion. And then a couple months later, I just wanted to keep my relationship up with this doctor, and just in case, because I was seeing major improvements with diet. Like I said, I wasn't experiencing any symptoms, but I just didn't know. I didn't know if this had longevity. I didn't know if things would flare back up like they did in the past. So I wanted to keep my options open with my doctor. So I still had a standing appointment that I actually ended up going to. This was probably a month or two after I started my successful diet. And I ended up seeing the physician's assistant that was working with my doctor, and her attitude was pretty bad. She basically had the attitude of, yeah, I've heard of this type of thing where people can do these diets and get a little bit of improvement here and there, but the odds are you are a diagnosed Crohn's patient, and the chances of you having a flare-up in the future are so high that you still need to consider pharmaceuticals. And she expressed this to me, that she viewed me as an untreated Crohn's patient with a higher chance of flare-up, a higher chance of surgical intervention in the future, and a higher chance of cancer, even though I had no symptoms. And so ever since that day, how could I possibly go back to these people that were saying that to me? Ever since that day, I have been unable to go back.
And so this has been, you said, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you said 6 years ago that you embarked upon this. And how many flare-ups have you had since that time?
I've been on the diet for about 6.5 years. I've had 0 symptoms and 0 flare-ups.
Yeah, so that seems to not jibe with what she was telling you. And how frequently would you have symptoms and flare-ups and things like that prior to the diet?
Every single day. Every single day I had more minor digestive symptoms, poor digestion, bloating, stomach cramps, like I said. But the main one, I can live with stomach cramps. The main one was the fistula. I would view this as a success, me being here today, if I can help one person with that symptom, because it is so bad.
Yeah. And I get it. I believe me, I've seen fistulas, and, many people aren't aware of what's going on, but did that heal up spontaneously on its own then after a period of time? How long did it take for it to close up and that type of stuff?
Yes. So the following day after going on animal-based diet completely, so the following day, I had about a 75% reduction in pain and discharge from my fistula. And upon the 4th day, I had 0 pain and ever since that fourth day, I've had absolutely no symptom of any sort of active fistula, no pain, no discharge, no nothing. And the other great thing is I have all the blood work to prove it. I even recently checked again all my inflammatory markers with a comprehensive stool analysis. About 4 or 5 different inflammatory markers were either undetectable or close to zero.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's really good. And so are you checking the labs just independently by yourself, or is there still a physician involved in this?
So I was checking my blood work on my own for many years, and mainly I was just going off of how I felt. I had such a horrible time in the modern medical system that I didn't even want to go back in there to get my blood work done, because they would always find some number to show me that what I was doing wasn't working, even though I felt better than I ever have in my whole life and had zero symptoms. So I felt like I didn't have any other options other than to go about this on my own, exactly how I healed myself. I healed myself on my own, and I can order inflammatory markers on my own. They give you the reference ranges, and it's really obvious if there's something in there that's alarming. But my most recent one was actually done through a newer physician in town. It's part of the problem about living in a small town is that there's not very many sort of the functional medicine practitioner, more of the modern approach to things. And back when I was going through this, there wasn't really any options online. There's so many options online now, which is just so great. But yes, this most recent blood work was done through a physician. Some of the really comprehensive stuff that I got done, I was unable to order on my own anyways. Yeah.
As tough as it is going through this, and credit for you for figuring it out yourself, even when you weren't getting help there. But how much easier would it have been for you if you would have had a physician that was supportive and said, "Hey, let's do the work with your different diets"? Would that have made your life a little bit easier, you think?
Oh, completely. All I was looking for was a glimmer of hope. All I needed was a little bit of information. When you're suffering that much, when you're like at the bottom, all you have is to go up. All I needed was a little bit of something, whether it was information, whether it was a little boost in my confidence, because I was ready to completely give up. And I know that there's so many people out there who are ready to give up. And I was right there. And yeah, it would have been amazing to have that support from someone who I deemed is having authoritative knowledge in this sort of space, because it was really challenging to go about this on my own. I was just reading Crohn's disease forums. It's not really in-depth knowledge or education. And yeah, every doctor that I interacted with basically thought that I was wasting time and increasing the probabilities of complications.
I guess speaking of these different forums and something like that, a lot of these forums, if you start bringing up things like a carnivore diet, they shut people down. There's some of these forums are actually even sponsored by some of the drug manufacturers, where they'll block you, mute you, kick you out of the forum. Did you run into that? Are you still on these forums? Do you mention, "Hey, this is what I've done to be successful"? Because you're obviously passionate about trying to share this knowledge with other people. Are you finding some of that still to be the case?
I haven't been on any sort of health forums in many years, but this has been one of the main reasons why I was inspired to reach out to you, Dr. Baker, and your team, because I've always felt a little bit guilty for not trying to share my experience more and let people hear this message. Because what changed my life ultimately, if I trace it all the way back, was some random guy that posted 3 sentences deep on the 5th page of a forum. And somehow I stumbled upon it just in the nick of time, and it changed my life forever. And hopefully this message can affect someone in that way too.
Yeah, it is just basically serendipity. This should be knowledge that I think it should be frontline treatment for every patient with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis for that matter. And it should be a first line therapy. Put somebody on an elimination diet, whether it's an SCD diet or a carnivore diet or whatever. And yet we work, which has not been my experience. Now, granted, I'm not a gastroenterologist, and there's probably people where it may not actually work for, but gosh, if it even works for 20% of the population, that would save them a tremendous amount of suffering. Because in all probability, had you not discovered this diet, your fistula probably would have progressed. Maybe you're on the biologic, which has limited efficacy. It might help, but they tends to wear off and you continue to do more. You probably would have had some sort of resection, I would imagine. You probably would have lost some portion of your bowel, maybe ended up with maybe even an ostomy of some sort, which obviously is not an outcome that most people would desire for sure. You mentioned some of these other effects. Let me just ask you, diet today, what does your day-to-day diet look like on a basis 6 years into resolve your Crohn's?
Yeah, I'm really into my routine. Like most people that join this way of life, I pretty much eat the same thing every day. I do seem to eat a little bit more, maybe dairy, than some people in this community. My breakfast is just a local honey sweetened Greek yogurt. I do have honey in my diet, especially before and after my more intense workouts. Yogurt, honey, a little bit of organic dates. And for lunch, it's pretty much just ground beef and butter, salt. And then for dinner, it's either some sort of dish with ground beef or steak.
Okay. And was this something that you've been able to do the whole time? Or because some people would say, like a lot of people with Crohn's have to avoid dairy, they might have to avoid sugars and things like that, like honeys and fruit and things like that. Was that something you were able to progress to over time, or were you able to do it from basically day one?
The honey and yogurt were there from day one. So the author of the book that I got originally, my diet originally was the SCD Diet, authored by Elaine Gottschall. She has a great explanation and gives some great visuals of how different undigested food particles can affect the gut and create inflammation. The book is called Breaking the Vicious Cycle, if anyone's interested. And honey was okay in her way of seeing things because it was a monosaccharide, which is, in her mind, something that is very easily absorbed and easy on the digestion, unlike bisaccharides and polysaccharides found in other sugars and starches and grains. So yes, I did have honey from day one. I've always liked it. It's always seemed very gentle on digestion. And for dairy, it's always been hard cheese and yogurt. I will have, like with steak and with my dinner, sometimes I will have a side of just sliced hard cheese. One other thing that I wanted to mention, which I hear you bring up often, Dr. Baker, is electrolytes on this diet. And with my fitness routine, I also use a dry sauna almost every day. I did not understand how much salt I needed, and I wasn't even close. And this was actually a recent development. And once I tripled my salt intake, especially on workout and sauna days, I felt way more energized. I had more energy throughout the day. Every once in a while, I would feel like I needed a nap. And that is completely gone now. Completely.
How about you? You'd mentioned you were always kind of underweight, and certainly Crohn's disease doesn't help that. If anything, Crohn's disease patients often tend to be very underweight and malnourished. How much weight have you been able to gain since maybe your lowest point to perhaps now?
Yeah, just when I was going into high school, when I was diagnosed, when I was around the age of 14, 15, I was somewhere between 130 and 135 pounds, just really skinny. And it was a huge difference changing my diet with my workout routine in terms of the weight that I could put on. My average weight right now is about 175. So I gained quite a bit of weight.
And so 175, and how tall are you?
6 foot.
6 foot. Okay. Yeah. So 6 foot, 135 is quite thin. Yeah. I was actually quite thin in high school as well. I was 6'1", 140 when I entered, and I think I got to 190 by the time I exited high school. But so as far as obviously it had to take a toll on you mentally when you've got fistulas and you're constantly symptomatic and being told, hey, you're going to need medicines the rest of your life. How were you doing from a mental standpoint, from like depression type of thing? I can understand why one would be depressed with that. And has the diet impacted your mental function, mood, things like that?
Yeah, great question. In terms of my mental health, it was absolutely horrible. For ever since I could remember, even back early elementary school, I always remember being anxious almost all day. My anxiety was horrible back from elementary school up until, I don't know, and basically until I got my health back. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The depression, it was horrible. Having these symptoms was just such an overwhelming thing in my life. I almost couldn't think about anything else because I was in so much pain. And yeah, I pretty much lost all hope, lost all faith, and had pretty much no confidence because you start viewing yourself as having this broken body. And it obviously it'll lead to a broken mind as well. And yeah, like I said, all I needed was that glimmer of hope, and I found it on that forum, and I ran with it full speed ahead, and everything improved. I would say that my mental health side of symptoms, I've seen as drastic of an improvement as my physical symptoms.
Yeah, that's one of those things people have always separated mental health seems like from the rest of our health, but it really are all interrelated. Your brain is an organ, just like your liver, just like your heart. It all requires good nutrition. And when it's not working optimally, then we just don't feel good. Mentally, we don't feel good. And so glad you found that what works with you. Do you have any family around you? Do you have a family? And if so, obviously they have had to notice the change over time. How was that perceived? And when you went to this, I'm going on this animal-based diet where I'm mostly just eating a bunch of meat and a few other things. How was that received within the family, and how is it now?
Yeah, luckily, I feel like most people in my family were used to me always looking for something in the health world and doing little experiments and elimination diets. And most of them just had this perception of whatever works. And it's funny now because I've helped my mom with a couple of her symptoms, and now she eats steak almost every day. And my sister, who about a year ago was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and she called me right away. And I said, you need to listen to me. You need to go on this diet and just try it. You have nothing to lose. If it doesn't work, just go back to the way you were. And so it completely healed and reversed her ulcerative colitis, and within weeks to a month, she was back to normal digestion. The family is very supportive. They see the benefits. They know that all of this healing and regaining of health, it happens for a reason. And that reason is you're no longer being food poisoned.
Yeah, amen to that. I think a lot of these diseases we have are just we're eating the wrong diet. I like to call IBS, you're eating the wrong damn diet, I think, instead of what that is. And then IBD is just an extrapolation. And you mentioned when you're talking to the PA and said, I'm considering you as an untreated Crohn's patient, and you have all these additional risks, including cancer, particularly colorectal cancer, because we know that's a very, very prominent risk for that. It's if you have inflammatory bowel disease, whether it's ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, your risk for colorectal cancer goes up. It's like a 3,000% increase, or 30 times the normal risk. And what has been your thought about that as far as I've got Crohn's as a diagnosis on my record, but I don't have any more symptoms. I'm asymptomatic. I've got basically no inflammatory markers, and you're eating, and because some people say red meat is associated with colorectal cancer, although the relative risk is tiny. It's a 1% absolute risk increase, even if you believe the WHO stats, which I think are questionable. But what are your thoughts and concerns around long-term health?
Right now, I have no concern about I don't view myself as having an increased chance of cancer because I had this diagnosis in the past. I tend to be a little bit extreme now with how I view these diagnoses, as I pretty much got to the point where I almost look at a diagnosis like I had Crohn's disease, just like you were referring to with IBS, and just like my sister was experiencing with ulcerative colitis. Now, I got to the point of asking myself, do I have a lifelong disease, or was I eating foods that were completely destroying my gut lining, my microbiome, and my overall health? Now, if I eat a little bit of poison every day and I get negative side effects from that poison, I don't consider that a lifelong disease. You just need to stop whatever's creating that stimulus. And I got pretty confident with that stance after so many years of being on this diet and the blood work and stool analysis to confirm how I'm feeling.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's see. As far as when we're talking about foods that are contributing to disease in general, you grew up in Montana. Did you grow up in Billings? Is this kind of home your whole life?
Yeah, I grew up in Missoula, so close to Billings.
I'm sorry,
but
Missoula. Yeah, and if you look at my diet, you describe your diet as cereal and Pop-Tart. That's pretty much what I grew up on too in the 70s. I'm 20 years or so older than you. Same kind of diet for me. And fortunately, it's curious because you have ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. Your sister has ulcerative colitis. These are two inflammatory bowel diseases that some people say maybe it's a genetic predisposition, which it couldn't be true. But I assume you and your sister were eating the same food growing up. I don't know how close you guys were together in age, and your poor mom or dad, whoever's feeding you, probably didn't know, because they don't. I mean, this is what we're told to eat: a bunch of grains, feed them cereal. It's got the heart healthy label on it. Oh my God, I'm going to put some Cheerios in there. And at the end of the day, what's happening is we get all these diseases, which certainly could be contributed by that. I think our modern diet is a disaster on our gut. I don't know if you've mentioned, did you have any kids or anything like that?
No, I'm married, no kids yet.
No kids yet. Okay. But knowing what you know now, assuming you have kids, whether you want them or not, that's up to you. But what do you think about feeding children a diet? How do maybe you can avoid some of this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wondered about the genetic sort of predisposition to these things, because it does seem to be affecting my family. I have some cousins that also have some inflammatory bowel issues. But yeah, it's a great question. About me and my wife have discussed it. And yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make rational sense to me that there are child-specific foods like we're taught. I think mostly that's a form of marketing. And yeah, there would be no reason if I had a child that they couldn't eat the way that we do. At this point, my wife is, for the most part, eating very similar to me. She sees what it can do. She's even noticed some other improvements herself, even though she didn't have anything as drastic as me. Yeah, I would see no problem with that, with feeding them the same foods that we eat.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, because you sit there as an adult and you realize that, oh my God, all this food has been wrecking my health. And we're very happy to feed it to our kids. They're like, kids deserve to be kids, and a little sugar's not going to hurt them. And it's just comical, because you're thinking about, if you know this is bad for you, why would you? It's like smoking. Smoke is bad. Why would you have your kids smoke? It's just crazy. At the very least, just feed them whole foods. My gosh, all this garbage that people are feeding kids, and we're seeing Crohn's disease. And I didn't realize this in Crohn's, but it's something that's diagnosed relatively young. We see it a lot of like teenage boys. This is a classic age range where you start seeing these inflammatory bowel diseases in young kids. And it's kind of, that's definitely like I said, a life-changing, in a negative way, event. And it's probably avoidable. As you said, started noticing around 14 years. So only a decade of eating suboptimal food, and you've already got this potentially life-altering disease where you very well could have lost a significant part of your gut, which would, again, start losing parts of your gut, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. And now you have presumably normal gut function. And how, again, you're eating, you said it's basically some yogurt, some meat. That's what it sounded like. So probably very little fiber in the diet, I'm guessing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, almost no fiber. The only fiber that I eat comes from, I'll have 1 or 2 dates with my yogurt. I would say overall, if I could put a percentage on it, 90 to 95% of my daily caloric intake is from beef.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And the beef you're getting, where do you get it from, by the way?
I get it from 2 sources. Both are actually different local grocery stores and both local meats.
Okay, good. Yeah, Montana's got some great cows running around. Every time I go to Montana, I always feel good because there's a lot of cows around there. What about, are you on social media at all? Do you do any social media stuff, or you have time for that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. And I'm happy to put my Instagram out there for if people resonate with my story or need some sort of support or other information about my story. I'm always open to help people, because this is how I got my life back, was some guy online. And I've always felt like I needed to at least attempt to pay it forward in some way.
Yeah, why don't you share that if you don't mind? I'm going to go and find you and follow you myself, but so people that might have an interest in this. So what's your Instagram handle?
Yeah, so it's just my name, Tanner Neal. My last name is Nel. And yeah, you'll be able to find it.
All one word?
All one word.
Tanner Neal. Yeah, I found you there. There's a
Tanner.Neal. I'm sorry.
Tanner.Neal. Yeah, I got you there. Yeah, let me see if I can get you there. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, we've got your request. Follow back. All right, got it. All right, awesome, man. One other thing, if you could say something to a doctor, maybe a gastroenterologist who's treating Crohn's disease or other inflammatory bowel disease, what would you want him to know?
It was always really confusing. I tried to put myself in their shoes. They have decades of education and are such an authority over our bodies and the information and what we do and how we think. A lot of the information comes from the doctors in our local community. And it always just blew my mind that I came in as such a success story and they were completely uninterested in any of my information, completely uninterested, to the fact where I don't even think that they believed me. And if I spent my entire life passionately dedicated to helping people with these sorts of bowel issues, and one of my patients came in and said, "Hey, I got rid of all my symptoms in a matter of days," I feel like I would maybe give that person a couple minutes and ask them at least what they did. And yeah, I understand that a regular doctor might not be able to recommend something as drastic as go home and eat nothing but beef and salt. Because yeah, most people aren't going to do that. So most people are going to need another option. But I think more people would take that option than we think. I certainly would have if my doctor gave me some sort of dietary guideline that would potentially help me and be able to get my life back. But what they say, a patient cured is a customer lost. And it's not in the business model. It's just not. And I would love for them to hear stories like this, but in their current model, these suggestions, it wouldn't work. And they're not interested in it because like I said, from the business side of it, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a shame. And like I said, it's for you guys to know, our company, Revero, once we start out, we'll be seeing patients similar to you and providing the support that I think you need to make an attempt with lifestyle and fully support it. Anyway, Tanner, thank you so much. I do have to go. Appreciate what you're doing and sharing this message. I think it's something that, gosh, there's probably thousands and there's 1 million patients a year with inflammatory bowel disease in the US at least. And so there are millions of people out there worldwide suffering from this. And like I said, the more the people get out there and share this, hopefully we can avoid some of that. But anyway, thank you so much. The rest of you guys, thanks everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, Tanner.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.